Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election.
Bill has hit the nail right on the head yet again. I have disliked Maher for a decade. But the truth on this issue is so obvious, even he can see it. I appreciate Bill Maher on a statement-by-statement basis. In the long run, I don't trust him. Bill, I sense the wind's changing. I'm trying to protect myself. Maher has always been consistently left, but he has never been psychotic left. Make sure to subscribe. This is a new channel, and I'll appreciate the early adopters to this movement. Leave a comment and let the show commence.
Loss as a result of racism and sexism. Yes, if only we weren't so irredeemably unenlightened, we would have elected a black president by now. Oh, what, we did?
New article in the Wall Street Journal claims that the shift to the right in this election reveals that Americans view themselves as belonging to a particular economic class more than their race and gender. And Bill Maher said it's not the only thing Democrats got wrong. Take a look.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism. Yes, if only we weren't so irredeemably unenlightened, we would have elected a black president by now. Oh, what, we did? Asked if racism is built into our society. White progressives agreed with that at higher levels than black and Hispanic people. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class? I mean, you know, again, I got my popcorn. I don't know why people did what they did. I see all these reasons, and so, okay, time will tell. But what do y'all think?
I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And, the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education. And so the notion somehow that that is not true, this is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I think you're missing his point.
Let me just finish. And so I've said that before, and there was so much backlash because I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans, they thought that he was...
These are some of the questions that the mainstream media just refuse to address in a serious way, which shows just how incompetent they are when it comes to informing the public. It's perfectly reasonable what he said, but he will get backlash because that community can't seem to handle even the smallest criticism. Whoopie stating that The View is a show that present both sides of the story is the most delusional thing I've heard this year. My dream is that one day this show will get canceled.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold on. Calm down, everybody. Just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
take a beat.
Well, let me jump in here because I think, Sonny, what you say is valid, and I think absolutely that is part of the problem. But when we hang our hat on that's the only problem, or
no
the
one's
main...
saying it's the only.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying the backlash is that when people hang their hat on that being the only reason, any criticism of Vice President Harris must be because she's a woman or she's black. I voted for, thank you, I voted for Hillary Clinton, not because she was a woman, she was the most qualified. I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris because more of my values fell in line with what she stood for. So all of that can be true. There is something here to the socioeconomic class, though, that is crossing racial divide in academic and education, too. Americans with a college degree 30 years ago were roughly 20% of the population and held the same percentage of household wealth as those without a degree. Yeah. 30 years later, this is important, Americans with a college degree account for 38% of the population and 73% of the household wealth. The haves and the have-nots have gone so far apart that they are rising up right now, and they cross every line of our democracy.
Okay, can I,
Okay.
So, look,
Go ahead.
I think most people are not saying that it was all about sexism and it was all about racism. Right, most people are not saying that. I would say to Bill Maher, who I like, whose show I've been on several times, that maybe, just maybe, when you live life as a woman and as a woman of color, you feel it and you know it a little bit more than a white man does in America. And so I'm not saying, you know, he says that folks see everything through the lens of racism and sexism. Not everything, but if you're not seeing racism and sexism in America, then you need to clean your lenses.
But yeah.
Because, you know, so you know, look, this is something that I also find interesting, that when Democrats and liberals talk about race or sexism, it's immediately labeled as identity politics, which has a negative connotation. It's a term that Republicans have coined, and it's been very effective. But when Donald Trump goes to Miami and talks to Cubans, that's not identity politics. When Donald Trump goes to Dearborn, Michigan, and promises Arabs something, that's not identity politics. When he goes to Jews and promises them the opposite, that's not identity politics.
So I think it's important that we remember 2/3 of this country does not have a 4-year degree. And in fact, 38% who do live 9 years longer than those who don't. Something is happening in this country. It's a lot of my family who don't have 4-year degrees. They may not even have associate's degrees, who they're working harder than they ever have. They have multiple jobs and they can't get ahead. Kamala Harris had this great thing about $25,000 for first home buyers. That is aspirational, beyond aspirational for a lot of this country. They don't have the credit. They don't have the money to match the other $25,000. This is a real divide here. And when they're told, you know what, we do care about border security, not because we're xenophobic, but because the country is paying more money to house and to help those people.
Then why are the Republicans...
How are the hosts so blind to their own hypocrisy? Unbelievable what hypocrites these women are. Comical that they should complain about the media not telling both sides of the story when the media is already 90% on their side and they never tell the other side on their show. Watching The View, it's like watching Jerry Springer. Bill Maher is one of the few liberals I'll listen to because he doesn't blindly follow the liberal talking points. I don't always agree with him, but it's so much easier to meet someone halfway, or at the very least on a talking field, when you know they are using their one mind rather than simply having been programmed like the rest of you sheep.
Against giving people a living wage. Why is the Republican Party constantly against $15?
I'm generally for a minimum wage, but a lot of these folks who work at small businesses, not the big corporations, are smart enough to know if there's 50 people at my shop and they raise the minimum wage, a lot of us are losing our jobs. They get that. They don't want a handout. They want a chance to get ahead.
No, and nobody wants a handout. That's why when people started talking about welfare years ago, it's like you weren't talking to people who were on welfare. Yeah. Nobody wants to be on welfare. Yeah. Nobody wants to be down. Everybody wants a leg up. We all want to do better for our families. Mm-hmm. There's not a person, black, white, male, female, who doesn't want that for the family. I like what you said, because as a woman, I see things differently. As a black woman, I see things and hear things differently. I hear when people don't believe that there's an issue.